A glimpse at the truth is good for people. Even if most can't accept what they see, there's no shame in running back to your car and driving away. Someday, you'll be ready. Then, you'll come back. Life has all kinds of different paths, and it can feel very difficult to know exactly where you are, how far you are along, or where you're going to end up. If you're like me, then you also once thought that it would be easy to figure out and to coast along whatever path you found. It's more likely though that life isn't that straightforward, and even when it seems like it should be clear and smooth, it's not. Sometimes it feels like we're being held back, and sometimes that feeling isn't coming from something external, it's coming from within. Hi, my name's Exo, and in this video I'm going to be talking about self-reflection, anger management, and a little game called Celeste, and how it explores those themes wonderfully. Obviously, spoiler alert for the game Celeste. If you haven't heard of it, or if you haven't played the indie darling game known as Celeste, then I highly recommend it. It's a 2D pixel art precision platformer. Its simple design and minimal mechanics make it easy to jump into. In fact, there are only 3 main mechanics: jumping, dashing, and grabbing. Combine these simple mechanics with each level's environment and very tight controls and you get an amazing feeling game. Thanks to the brilliant level design, it eases players into a beautiful difficulty curve. Celeste does a wonderful job of tricking you into becoming good at platformer. It never feels like it's holding your hand, and by the time you're being thrown into the really difficult and interesting challenging rooms in the game, there's been enough gradual desensitization that you almost don't realise how much harder the game has gone. Paired with this silky smooth difficulty curve is the emotional core at the heart of Celeste. And that's really what I want to talk about today. For context, the game has the playable character, Madeline, climb a mysterious mountain called Celeste. As you complete each level, more tidbits about Madeline's reasoning for climbing the mountain and her struggles in life become clearer. The main part I want to focus on starts in just the second chapter. As Madeline passes a ghastly looking mirror, a reflection of Madeline appears. Seconds later, that phantom form in the mirror bursts through and escapes. The figure finds you later in the level, and Madeline begins a surreal conversation. The creepy figure refers to itself as a part of you. She's insistent on getting Madeline to give up on climbing the mountain and begins chasing Madeline. Mirroring Madeline's movements perfectly, she jumps, dashes, and climbs in hot pursuit. Madeline's able to slip away and finds a ringing payphone and answers it, and desperately tries to explain the situation. Now, while this part of the game technically was a dream, the powers of Celeste Mountain are very real, and it did release a part of you. She is out there and will appear as a character throughout the rest of the game. A quick clarification about part of you. The common nickname for this character is Madeline, but I'm going to be calling her part of you throughout this video. This is a really important point that we'll come back to later, so just put a pin in that. But first, I'd like to explain a little about me. I like difficult games. Celeste is one of those. While I mentioned earlier that the base game has a very fair difficulty curve, there are extra revisions of the levels which are unlocked through collectibles within the game, and they are much harder. On top of that, once you've completed the game, every level has a golden strawberry collectible. This is a collectible that you have to carry through the entire level without dying in order to actually collect. And there are golden strawberries for the revised harder levels as well. I'm proud to say that I've been able to get all of the golden berries within the base game. Not the DLC, because the DLC is bullshitly hard and I can't do that yet. Maybe. I like the feeling of accomplishment that comes from taking on a hard challenge and winning. Or being able to look back and see that I've developed a skill and can now perform that skill reliably and do what used to feel impossible. Unfortunately, with that desire to achieve very highly yet difficult things, I have encountered a lot of issues with anger and rage. For over a decade now, I've been a big StarCraft 2 fan, and I have made lifelong friends from that community. Overall, it has been a positive on my life, but it has also been the source for some of my lowest and worst moments. Multiplayer games like StarCraft are brutal, as there is almost an innate need to constantly improve. When you get that deep into a game and care that much about being good at it, then it really gets hard to not associate your ranked MMR along with your self-worth. Seriously, this is something that you should avoid doing at all costs. I experienced borderline complete meltdowns due to this game, because I would go on tilt and continue to play until I physically or mentally couldn't take anymore. And then afterwards I would brutally tear myself apart for being bad at the game. This is a very unhealthy behaviour, and after a few years it really became the norm. It formed as a habit, and that habit ended up leaking into other real-world things. As you progress through Celeste Mountain, Madeline meets and has conversations with a small cast of other characters. At the start of the video I showed a line from Granny, and we'll be seeing some more great lines from her later on. Granny lives on Celeste Mountain and is the first character that Madeline meets. Madeline warns the old lady that her driveway here is dangerous, and Granny just laughs in response and says that, well, if the driveway seemed dangerous, then she may not be ready to deal with the dangers of Celeste Mountain. We also meet a character called Theo, a young man who is also climbing Celeste Mountain. Theo has his own stuff going on and is an interesting character in his own right, but I won't be going in depth on him here. Go play the game for yourself if you want to see. However, there is an important interaction at the end of Chapter 4. After scaling the windy, rocky ranges of the mountain, Madeline meets Theo and finds an old gondola lift, which is the only way to cross a big chasm ahead of them. Theo is eager to get on and get across, and Madeline, with some slight concerns, boards and the two begin to proceed across the chasm. Madeline worries about how thin the air is, while the laid-back attitude of Theo continues on as he suggests taking a selfie with the view. Just as the camera shutter goes, there's a loud noise, and the gondola lift bumps heavily. Part of you appears and is sitting on top of the lift as it stalls. Madeline, startled, paces around the lift, while Theo reaches for the lever and accidentally pulls the thing off. The situation dawns on Madeline as her fear takes over and a panic attack begins. Fortunately, Theo is supportive and tells Madeline a trick to help control her breathing. Picture a feather floating in front of you. See it? Okay. Your breathing keeps that feather floating. Just breathe, slow and steady, in and out. Steady exhales blow the feather upwards, while deep inhales allow the feather to gently fall. The gondola lift kicks back into life and the two get safely across the chasm. A startled Madeline dashes off to solid ground of the mountain in relief. If only I had known that little breathing trick to help me calm down, then perhaps I could have avoided a serious accident. A few years ago, I did something very stupid. It was a Sunday in late April. The spring weather was probably with us, and that's the best time of year in my opinion. My mum had been asking for help with a DIY project, which I had promised to help her out with. We spent the morning going out and buying the materials. I had borrowed all the tools I'd need in advance so that I could get the job done. I was eager and confident that I could do a good job. Mum insisted that we get extra of the raw materials that we needed, but we were on a tight budget and I was sure that I knew what I was doing. So we got a small amount of extra, but it was pretty much exactly what we needed. We got back in the early afternoon, and after a few cups of tea and a good chat, it was time to actually get on with the work. Now, there's a saying for DIY: measure twice, cut once. I swiftly learned why that's important on that day. I almost immediately cut a piece of wood wrong, which ate into the small amount of extra that we had. Carefully, I continued on, with my mum sweetly making sure I always had a cuppa on the go. Things were going smoothly until towards the end. It felt like it had been hours, but eventually, another bad cut happened. I felt awful. The whole Sunday spent on this only to mess it up. I felt the voice inside my head begin to berate myself, like when I would lose at StarCraft. I had deliberately kept this kind of anger and stuff as hidden as possible from my mum. I'd been living away from home for a few years by this point, and my rage had developed into slamming desks, screaming loudly, and even breaking some household items. During these times I would lock myself away from anybody else and be inconsolable. Every time I felt like I lost a part of my soul, and I would swear that I would never let the anger overtake me like that again. On the spring day of the DIY, there was one last chance. We were able to salvage the miscut piece of wood for another small part, meaning we had just enough to finish the job. A few more careful cuts, and we were on to the very last piece. And yes, after all that, I fucked up the final cut. The voice in my head, which I'd managed to put off for a while, struck back in full force. I desperately tried to maintain composure. My mum wasn't even that bothered. I vaguely remember her saying that we could go out next weekend and finish it off then. But I was already past a threshold. I wanted to scream at myself. I couldn't bear the thought of my mum seeing me like that. I couldn't sit still though. My body on fire as a cacophony echoed in my head about how stupid and useless I was. I said that I needed some air and I left through the front door. There's a field really close to my mum's and I just wanted to sprint across it as fast as I could. I'd barely stepped onto the field before I was in a complete, uncontrollable bull charge of a run. That only lasted for about 3 steps before I was on the floor, landing with a snap, which crackled and popped as I stood back up. Shock flooded over me as I stumbled and turned around back towards my mum's. Each step on the grass sounded like stepping on gravel from the rattle in my right shoulder. Getting to the front door, I fell to my knees as the adrenaline had started to pass and the pain really kicked in. I had broken my right collarbone in 2 places. During the 4-hour wait at A&E, I had a lot of time to really think about what had happened. How the behaviours of being harsh and self-degrading and just being angry at myself for the fact I was angry had led me to having a serious injury. It was around this point where I began my journey. It was just a small thought at the time. I need to get therapy and sort this out. At the time, I thought this would mean to remove the part of me that made me angry, to get rid of it, to disown it, so it could never hurt me again. Spoiler, that's not it. That's not the right answer. Trust me. Just stick with me. Continue watching. Ooh. At the start of chapter 6, after having a long chat with Theo, Madeline is feeling optimistic. In another dreamlike sequence similar to chapter 2, Madeline has a confrontation with the part of her. With the backdrop of the Northern Lights, the two talk. Madeline, being more relaxed than the other confrontations, says confidently, "I finally understand who you are. You're not my true reflection. You are everything I need to leave behind. You are cruel, paranoid, controlling. No, it's okay. I understand now. I don't need you anymore." This internal conversation Madeline has with herself struck me really hard when I was replaying the game after my own self-inflicted anger injury. I could see myself standing up to my own anger issues, disowning it, moving past it, never having to deal with it again. In a lot of stories, this is a kind of climactic tone where the hero gets over all their issues and is able to be the perfect version of themselves without flaw. And that's what I wanted to become. But real life is not like that. And fortunately, Celeste goes deeper into this element. As you might have noticed in the background footage, part of you is not taking this very well. So, you're just abandoning me? You're so stupid! You think you can just leave me behind? You think you can blame everything on me? You think you're above me? Answer me! A tendril grabs Madeline and restrains her. Feeling the panic sets in, she centers her thoughts about the feather and tries to use it to calm herself down. You're going to think about a feather to stop me? The part of you mocks as she slashes the feather away. You're not above me. And you can't climb this mountain. It's time to accept that. As the part of you throws Madeline all the way down the mountain. And again, despite this being a dreamlike sequence, Madeline really does fall deep into a cave within the mountain. This is a low point emotionally for Madeline. After starting to believe that she could make it, she has dealt a major setback. All caused by that part of her that keeps making things impossible. This felt so relatable, but there's this part that she just cannot stop from doing, whatever it wants. This is an ongoing issue that has been plaguing her life, like the anger issues had been for me. That despite the path ahead seeming clear and obvious, like if I could just get rid of this thing that's holding me back, that's making my life hard, then I could do anything. And why can't I just get rid of this part of me that is causing me to suffer? That's how I felt, and that's how I imagine Madeline feels as she is climbing out of the cave. The first person Madeline finds after picking herself back up is Granny, who, up to this point in the story, has mostly just laughed at Madeline, which she continues to do here. However, within this conversation, Granny goes from a slightly eccentric old mountain lady into a real, caring, wisdom-giving mentor. This girl you're talking about, it sounds like she's holding you back. That's my old lady voice. Talk to her. Figure out why she's so scared. Madeline admits that she's not thought about it this way. She's not thought about how, on this mountain, part of her is a fully personified being with her own thoughts and feelings. And that, yeah, she's scared. During the previous encounter, part of you was visibly worried. She showed signs of being upset, and then that devolved into anger. But underlying all that was a fear. Madeline accidentally said the worst possible things to part of you, that she wasn't needed anymore. Theo had also touched on this in an earlier conversation. So you want to destroy this part of you? Won't that hurt you too? For Madeline, it's this moment where the epiphany strikes and she finally understands that she's been going about this the wrong way. The real answer is self-acceptance, and it's not easy to do. This part of her that she's been pushing away since even before arriving at Celeste Mountain is, well, a part of her, and it can't simply be removed. Imagine what makes up a person. Their traits, personality, emotions, and even decisions. You can think of these as bricks that are built up over time and experience. Trying to remove a block can become impossible because the rest of the structure of that person is built around it. Or forcing that block out would completely make the person fall apart. And that's why simply removing a part of yourself is not possible. Madeline, with a refreshed outlook, pushes forwards to find the part of her, but this time it's not trying to get rid of her, but to truly understand her instead. Madeline finds part of you in an open clearing, sitting facing away, dejected. The conversation here shows Madeline's shift in perspective, and I think it's great how, for the first time in these meetings, that Madeline is the one taking control of the situation. Offering a real, practical way forward. All part of you can do is threaten in a flustered manner. I love how this leads immediately into another chase sequence, like earlier with Chapter 2, but this time it's Madeline chasing. And again, it's not to beat part of you into submission, but it's to make her see that Madeline really is trying to understand her, and that they can move forwards together. I love when games use mechanics in a sort of storytelling fashion, and I think this was an exceptional choice to have this kind of boss battle in the game, but to have it be explicitly framed as a moment of growth and understanding through self-reflection. And the game leaves no room for confusion on this. At the end of this sequence, part of you understands that she cannot keep running and gives up. I guess you don't need me after all. If you want me to go away, I'll try. That's not what I want. I need you now more than ever. Please, let's work together. Madeline approaches part of you with genuine care and need. Pulling her in for a tight embrace. In this moment, where Madeline has shown deep self-reflection and accepted who she is, she and part of you are able to merge back together. And because this game is excellent at using mechanics as storytelling devices, Madeline now gains the ability to do 2 air dashes instead of 1. I love this so much. The final levels are impossible without the double air dash ability. Truly, Madeline could not have made it up the rest of the mountain without this ability, and accepting herself, the flaws and concerns and all, has made her stronger. That's truly the soul of this game, that you cannot remove a part of yourself. Even if it seems bad, it's not. It's a part of you. Remember earlier, I mentioned that the community nicknamed part of you as Madeline? Well, there are 2 reasons why I didn't want to use that name for this video. 1. Madeline is a funny play on the bad part of Madeline. It's fair to say at the start of the game that it seems to be what she is. some kind of bad, evil, negative Madeline. But that's not really who the character is or what the story wants to tell about the character. And 2, in-game she's always referred to as part of you in conversation. And there's an important, possibly double intention meaning on why it was written that way. All the conversations referring to part of you can be read literally out of context of the game and still make sense. I personally really like that because if you reread conversations in-game and just think of the general sense of a part of you, it still works and is generally good advice. Now, I wish I was able to learn this lesson as easily and quickly as Madeline was in Celeste. Part of the beauty of good stories is that you get to see all the highlights of a character arc and not the years of struggle in between them. For me, it really has taken a good few years. A few years where I continued to get angry and lash out in ways that made me feel ashamed and embarrassed. All the while I was trying to put distance from myself and that anger. I was running away from a part of me like Madeline was. I've been working with a therapist and they've helped me understand these things a lot better. While I am not proud of the actions I took in the past, I am no longer ashamed of the feeling of anger. That's an important difference. You can't control the emotion, only the behaviour, and there is no shame in feeling an emotion. In fact, being able to personify and imagine your emotions as a person and talking with them is a technique called visualization. And with the proper guidance, this has been an incredibly helpful way for me to deal with my anger. I've still got work to do with self-acceptance and some other things, but going through this myself has really made me appreciate the soul that was put into making Celeste. Madeline's journey doesn't end there. They still want to reach the summit. If you remember, Madeline fell down the mountain, so the final level is actually a kind of mega sprint back up the mountain, revisiting the levels and their unique mechanics again, combined with the extra dash to blast through them all. At each section, Madeline and part of you split apart and talk more. They acknowledge each other's feelings and get a deeper level of understanding of what they need. I think the really important thing to take away from that is that even though Madeline had done the self-acceptance bit, there was still more to learn. It's not a once and done and you're forever sorted. It's a gradual journey of continued self-reflection. I really liked how that one showed how the two can banter together a little, and the overall tone felt more like they were having fun climbing the mountain. However, as the challenges increase, so do the seriousness and importance of their conversations. When Madeline showed some hesitation, part of you was there to actually encourage her and admitted that she believed that they can do it. The next conversation between the two may be the most important one there is, with a few points to break down. Firstly, they really sincerely apologise to each other. We've seen these two bicker and blame each other throughout the whole game. Even as Madeline acknowledged the fear a part of you had back in the cave, there was still this moment where they were arguing about whose fault it all is. But here, during this moment, they stop trying to assign blame, and that's what makes the apologies so sincere and great. Immediately after, Madeline keeps things positive, reaffirming that they will make it to the summit. But then part of you has doubts. What if we don't make it? Again, this is another moment where it's easy for a story to overcome this concern with relentless positivity, or just avoid the topic altogether. But in Celeste, they approach it, and Madeline replies with possibly the best thing she could have said. I'd be okay with that. Simple and powerful. Getting to the summit is still the goal, but it's not all or nothing. She has already learned and gained so much from coming to the mountain that she can be content even if they don't reach the top now. And they do. They make it to the summit. And here, there's one final important discussion that I want to highlight. The reality that once Madeline leaves the mountain, she will no longer be able to directly listen to part of you. Instead, the two are going to have to coexist internally. Both agree that it can't go back to how it used to be. This conversation is a promise from Madeline to part of you that she will continue to internally reflect and be mindful to listen to her emotions from now on. A well-delivered, elegant moment made all the more beautiful from the setting sun and the serene skyline. And that's what I did. I made a promise to myself to always try and remember that it's okay to be angry. That getting frustrated and upset is a part of being human, and to feel that is okay. I can control the action I take when I'm angry, and I won't let that behaviour be something that I later regret. I understand that the feeling of wanting to scream is my emotions trying to talk to me, crying out that they are distressed and they need me to stop doing what I'm doing for my own good. For years, I ignored that, and I tried to avoid acknowledging how I was really feeling. It didn't make sense. I thought I shouldn't be getting angry, or getting upset, or getting frustrated, but I was. I know now that emotions don't always make sense in the moment, and that's also okay. It's been hard to get here, but it has been worth it. Celeste was just a small part of the puzzle for me, but it's wonderful to have found a game that so well represents this kind of emotional journey. This game is truly beautiful, and I cannot express my gratitude enough for it helping to show the process of self-acceptance. It's really important to be kind to yourself, and remember that no one has ever got this all figured out, and that's okay. I believe that part of the human experience is looking inwards and trying to understand yourself better. I hope this essay has showed why Celeste is one of my favourite games of all time, and why it means so much to me. Thanks for watching.